How's it going out there, YouTube? My name is Jesse, and we are doing another entry for Ace Month with
Lost Heroes of the Golden Age.
Yes, that's what we're doing. Okay, now this is another part of Ace Month, and for this week, we have a request by... That's right, and we are doing
Mr. Risk, the man without fear.
Yes, he is the man without fear.
That's a bold claim.
It's well deserved.
Why do they call him that?
I did a review. Watch the review, you'll see. Okay, we are doing Mr. Risk, the man without fear. There is a peculiar appearance issue. And what I mean by that is I explained it better in the video. I was looking up where he was so I could do the review, but in the appearances, they failed to mention 3 appearances. He has his own self-titled comic book that only lasted for 2 issues. They don't list that in the public appearances. You would think that if you get a title named after you, whether it's one, like with Captain Courageous, or several, like with Lash Lightning having Lightning comics named after him, you would think that those would appear in your public domain appearances, but I almost missed them. I just happened to be flipping through some random stuff about Mr. Risk, and I stumbled upon those. They're still part of Ace publication, so there's no reason that they should have been missed at all. But I go over this in the comic book, where they came from and what they turned into, because they didn't stay Mr. Risk. Like I said, it's only 2 issues. So let's go ahead and get into Mr. Risk. We'll discuss a little bit about why he's got the Man Without Fear tagline. A little bit about what was going on with his stories. I don't think I mentioned it in the review, but I might have mentioned it. He killed some of his the people that he went after when it was necessary. So let's get started with this
Lost Heroes of the Golden Age.
Lost Heroes of the Golden Age as Ace Month continues. Mr. Risk, real name Mr. Risk, first appeared in Our Flag Comics number 5 in 1942. The original publisher was Ace Magazines and created by George Mandel. Now, Mr. Risk is an interesting character in as the fact that he has no fear. And it's not just a makeup, I have no fear of things. He literally has no fear. They state in the first issue that he was born without the sense of fear in him. So he doesn't have any superpowers. He is apparently wealthy, a master of disguise, very smart, adept at fighting, and he also has a manservant known as Abdul, who calls him master, so it is a manservant. Now, as I said, he did appear in Our Flag Comics number 5, and he would appear in a lot of the Super Mystery Comics run. He would first appear in Volume 3, number 2, and then would appear in every issue through all the volumes that they had. Now, for some odd reasons, these volumes would run for 6 issues, and then they would restart the next volume. It was the same thing with Magno. I don't know why they did that. So you got Volume 3 to number 6, Volume 4, 1 through 6, Volume 5, 1 through 6. I have no idea why they went 6 volumes and then restarted them. I guess it had to do something with publishing. I think Super Mystery Comics, I mean, not a lot of the comics did that, but they divided their issue sets up into volumes. He appeared in a couple of issues of 4 Favorites. Now, looking for his public domain appearances, that's all that was listed. But whoever made these appearances, they need to go back and recheck these, because there are 3 appearances that they are actually missing in their public domain appearance logs. There are 2 issues of Mr. Risk Comics. Number 1, which is also number 7, we'll get to that in a second, and number 2. And then there is a 3rd appearance that is missing. It's Men Against Crimes. Now, the reason number 1 is also number 7 is there was a series called All Romance Comics, which I've only been able to find 5 issues titled through 6. Yes, it's missing number 5, but it's 1, 2, 4, and 6. Now, Mr. Risk and the All Romance Comics would continue on in being titled Mr. Risk, and it would start with number 7, which was actually his first comic, which was also number 1. I have no idea why they did that, because Mr. Risk never appeared in any of the All Romance comics. So why they would retitle it Mr. Risk, I have no idea. I understand that he was popular enough that he would get his own comic, but it only lasted for 2 issues. Now, after issue 2, the Mr. Risk comic would be retitled to Men Against Crime, and as you see on the cover here of number 3, right under the word crime, it says, formerly Mr. Risk. Now, this is the only comic that Mr. Risk would appear in, but technically this story wasn't his. He comes into the beginning of this issue, he talks to somebody at a cafe who tells him a story that has nothing to do with Mr. Risk, and then Mr. Risk appears on the last page. So he was more of a guest appearance in this first issue than it being a story about him, but he's still there. And then he wouldn't appear in any more of the Men Against Crime comics. So, as I said, Our Flag Comics, Super Mystery Comics, and 4 Favorites, they're missing a couple of the appearances. Now, there's not too much to go into about Mr. Risk on himself. He is basically kind of like a private eye, but he's not really a detective. He was involved with the stories, and we'll cover the first issue, and you can get a basic idea of who he is. He would either kill the criminals or they would die by their own hands. Not all of them died, but a large majority of them did from the issues that I was able to read. His lack of fear would put him in situations that most people would not put themselves into because they have a sense of self-preservation. With him lacking fear, he doesn't have that self-preservation sense. So he puts himself in dangerous situations that he wouldn't need to be in if he had a sense of fear. Now, his manservant actually played a part in keeping him safe on more than one occasion because his manservant was smart enough to keep caution about him. So let's go ahead and cover the first issue. You're going to find some real problems with the paneling. They didn't do the paneling right, and you'll see in the first issue, and a lot of the issues had the same problem. You would have to jump around to follow the story properly through pages. Once you finally learned which panel belonged where it should have, you could read the story, but it does make it a little jarring and pulls you out of the story when you have to search for the next panel. So let's go ahead and cover the first issue I don't see him having any other appearances after his appearances in Ace. If he did, I haven't been able to locate them. So let's go ahead and get the first issue covered. Mr. Risk. Many men have been called fearless, but only one really deserves that description. A freak of nature born without the instinct of fear. It is impossible for him to be afraid of man, beast, or thing. A wealthy young man whose aim in life is to use his lack of fear to help others. Do you want someone to gamble his life for you? Then call Mr. Risk. And we have this lady in red. I better check with that note from the personal columns of the newspaper before I go in. I guess she ripped this out. It's torn in a weird way. My business is to take chances you are afraid to take. Don't worry about money. No fee. Phone Dangerfield 7777 and ask for Mr. Risk. Is that how phones? Is that how phone numbers worked in the 40s? I didn't realize that's how phone numbers worked back then. I thought they were like they are today, but this was what, 60 years ago? Okay. As she's getting ready to go in, someone calls out to her, and we learn that her name is Annie Barton. And from this exchange, we learn that his name is John Morrissey. Then a station wagon pulls up, and a panther hops out the back and mauls the man. And in this panel, it's rather gruesome. He's lying in a puddle of blood, where blood is dripping off the panther's jaws. Now, here's where the paneling gets kind of off kilter here. They have two small panels leading to a larger, and then you go back to two other panels. That's not the way that's supposed to work. If you're leading to a larger panels with more panels connecting to it, all four of those should be connecting. Then you go to the larger panel. I mean, when you do it this way, it's misconjointed. I mean, it's like you went forward and then you had to go backwards to continue going forward. That's not how you do stories. I mean, this is where you really needed arrows to show people how you were doing your story, which is funny because later on they do have arrows, and again, that's bad storytelling. He's coming after you. Get inside quickly. You must be Mr. Risk. Exactly. Get inside. Then the manservant comes out asking if he needs help with a gun in his hand. We see a man taking off with a woman right next to him, and as he's getting ready to take the shot, Annie says, "No, don't shoot that. No, don't shoot. That woman in the station wagon is my sister." As he takes the shot, she moves his arm so he shoots wildly in a different direction. He says, "I'm all right, Abdul. Get the car out of the garage and go after the station wagon." He faces off against the panther, and she tells him that he is going to be killed. A second later, the great jungle cat, tail between his legs, backs to the gutter whimpering, and then, I don't understand, the panther backed down. He's running away. Yet we see the panther starts to turn tail, and then Mr. Risk, he goes back into his office, and I guess he lets his manservant go in pursuit of the car. Now, he gets inside and he starts talking to her, and we find out that she is being wanted for the murder of her sister, but she claims that she didn't murder her sister. Let's see, my sister Helen disappeared from her room. There were a lot of blood stains. The police thought I killed her, but Mr. Morrissey, the man the panther just killed, knew I was innocent, and he was coming here to help to convince you. So as she's talking to him, the police knock on the door. Well, naturally, someone just died right outside of his office. So he ushers her off to a side room, I believe, behind a curtain, and starts talking to the officers. And they're having a conversation about how she's wanted for murder. And he says, "As you can see, officers, she's not here. Who is this girl? What kind of murder is she supposed to have committed?" And then the police start to tell them the story of how she killed her sister. Later, his manservant comes in and goes, Master, I am wounded." He said, "Who is that?" "My manservant, Abdul. One of you run outside and bring in the ambulance surgeon. There should be one outside for the panther killing." So they call in the surgeon and starts to stitch him up. And he ushers the police out. And when he goes back to the room that he ushered her off to, she seems to have left the building. Now, let's see. He says Northgate Park. And okay, he gets into a station wagon where he has a driver, apparently. Northgate Park and hurry. So he goes over and he sees where the station wagon has been wrecked. Now, Mr. Risk says he's going to hide out until someone comes to take care of the station wagon. So we see the hooded figure before standing with a tow operator as he's pulling the car out. Once the car has been hoisted onto the wrecker, the hooded man takes out a gun and then, with the gun in his hand, he stabs the tow operator in the neck with a knife. So he kills the tow operator and throws him into... And then he has the cowardly killer. That poor guy didn't stand a chance. Now he's dumping him in the back of the station wagon. So as the guy gets into the tow truck to drive away, he jumps into the back of the station wagon with the dead body. Okay. As they get to where they're going, which is a zoological house, Mr. Risk jumps out of the back of the station wagon. Curiously, he's got no bloodstains on him. And he ducks off to the side while the figure, who we never properly learned who he is, goes to the back of the station wagon, I guess to deal with the dead body, and Mr. Risk knocks him out and he rushes into the building. He's off to the side. Oh, there's Annie Barton. I wonder who that man is. Annie dear, since we are secretly married a month ago, I feel I have the right to say this. And we find that his name is Tom. And he thinks that she should give herself up to the police and not trust Mr. Risk. And she says, but if anyone can help me, Tom, he can. He's the bravest man in the world. Even the Panther backed down from his courage. She talks about how, let's see, I don't get good to the police, Tom. I have to say I saw Helen in that station wagon, which would connect her with the murder of Mr. Morrissey. Until I find out what's going on with Helen, I can't go to the police. So she thinks that the sister is alive and doesn't want to report that she might have been responsible for the Panther killing. He says, all right, then if you're going to be stubborn, come up and hide in my office. I'll go tell the professor what's happened. He leaves her there and Mr. Risk pops in. And they have to draw some arrows because they can't do paneling right. I mean, Ace Comics does that a lot. If they just did their paneling in the proper order, they wouldn't have to draw arrows. So he pops into the office and he says he wants the entire story. And then she tells about how her and a number of people were on a expedition of a pharaoh called Mel Testa. I probably butchered the hell out of that name. So on one of the mornings, she pops into her father's tent And he says that some of the stuff that they were excavating was stolen. And let's see, it's written in ancient Egyptian. It says, "For your sacrilege by the claw of Bupatis." I'm probably seriously butchering this. "Ye shall surely die." And there's a lot of exposition here. Batutis. I remember Egyptian history. Really? Was the patron of the goddess of Maltasar. She is half woman, half cat. Yes, these panther killings are revenge for the opening of the tomb. He wanted to know how Tom fit into this whole expedition, and she said that he was a talented sculptor, and that he was brought along so he could make objects of the various things that they dug up. And he decides to go talk to the professor about the talisman, and he notices something odd about it, that there was a tiger. And he's like, "Were tigers part of Egyptian history?" And the professor goes, "Good heavens, no, you're right. There never were any tigers in Egypt. Why then this tablet must be a fake." And then this guy off to the side says that he's heard enough, and he kills the lights, and I guess he kidnapped the professor. And then you hear a terrible sound of nervous animals and a woman screaming, and he runs down to the basement and he finds the professor with a knife in his back. And he says this with his dying breath, "Look out, he's still down here in the cellar. Ran when he heard you coming, caught me at the closet over there. He knew I'd," and he dies. Now he opens up the door and he finds a wax model. He's like, "This must be what Annie saw in the station wagon. A dummy of her sister. This gives me the answers to the whole thing." And then we see Annie is being stalked by the panther. Now he uses his flashlight, because the power is still off, to check the attention of the panther. The panther turns his attention to him and decides that he doesn't want to attack Mr. Risk. Now we find out that the panther has been trained, and Tom is trying to convince the panther to attack Mr. Risk. Let's see. He says, as he's talking about how he set this whole thing up, and then Mr. Risk said, "You had a hired thug drive the car, Welton, and you had the motive as Annie's husband. With all the others dead, you would be the sole living heir to Mr. Barton's fortune. You forged that warning plaque, and that was the first big mistake in picturing the goddess." But I'm not going to say this name again. "As half woman, half tiger, not knowing that tigers are," let's see, this whole, his head is inside of the thought bubble and it's breaking up this thing. "Not knowing that there are no tigers in Egypt and never were." His head being in the thought bubble, breaking up what he's saying, made it very disconjointed to read. And he says that he is going to go ahead and kill them and take the fortune. And hey, look, arrows, because you can't do storytelling properly. Here you really didn't need the arrows. You're supposed to have smaller panels leading into the bigger panel, so this was actually arrows that were unnecessary. He signals the jungle cat and it attacks him instead, and he grabs the panther from behind. "All right, killer, you did your duty. Now come with me. Don't try to make any trouble." And he makes sure that the jungle cat gets into the cage where it can't harm anybody else. So he leads Annie up these stairs out of the basement that they were in, and the police show up, and Mr. Risk says that she's innocent and the killer that you want. Let's see, the man you want is downstairs. We have plenty of proof that he's the killer. A short distance away, the guy that he knocked out earlier starts to come to, and this old guy says that the police are on the way, and he doesn't realize who this guy is. So he gets up and starts to strangle this old man. A scream of help, come on! The Welting Thug's assistant. He's knocked out the watchman and he's trying to get away. So it was the watchman who helped him out. He strangles him into unconsciousness and tries to run. And then he has a fight with Mr. Risk. And Mr. Risk knocks him down and is threatening to hit him one more time. And he's like, talk. And he's like, all right, I'm Rags Rescal. And Welton hired me to strong-arm for him. He killed Helen Barton by sicking that damn panther, blamed panther on her. I buried the body for him out here in a corner of the park. He imported the panther with some money he had saved up. It took his last cent. So we find out that this guy is just a strong-armed thug, and that he was killing people with the panther to cover up his own tracks. So Annie has been proven innocent, and she wants to pay him, and he says, well, I don't want payment, but I'll take the panther. A zoo will pay me a small fortune for a panther that can be controlled with just sounds. And she says, go ahead, take him. You can use that as payment. But she wants to know why the panther did not attack him. And he says, you see, I was born without the instinct of fear. Animals attack humans only when they can sense a faint trace of fear. With me, there is none. I am in the business to help others. Is that just, you know what? Never mind. And in the very last panel, it says, write and let us know how you like this brand new hero and altogether different character, and look for another Mr. Risk mystery in the next issue, which would have been rather hard because our Flag Comics ended at number 5. But he would go on to have considerably more stories in other comic books. There was no following that issue. I hope you liked this video. I hope that you are enjoying Ace Month so far. Like I said, the very last week we will be doing villains, which I don't normally do on here. It's usually Lost Heroes, not Lost Villains, but there are a couple from Ace that did stand more than just one and dones, and we'll go ahead and highlight some of those. Go ahead and keep sending in those requests if there are other heroes you want to see, not just for Ace, for any of the Golden Age publications. So, with that in mind, until next week, I'll be seeing you.